Hi, how you doing? Today we're going to go take a look at what the lovely folk on Reddit think about catch wrestling. A friend of mine sent me a screenshot of a Reddit comment about catch, and it made me chuckle, so I thought it might be fun to go and take a look myself and see what else there was. I picked 7 I thought were worth looking at here. Motor Yogurt 1451 said, "I've been training for a long time, and I can tell you without a doubt that catch wrestlers tend to prioritise being a contrarian asshole who sucks at grappling. The ones who do not tend to also hold advanced rank in BJJ." Yeah, what can I say? Harsh, but fair. I think it's probably worth just mentioning that Josh Barnett learned his grappling as catch first and foremost and was given his BJJ rank because of the ability he already had. So there's a possibility that the fairly clear implication that being a decent grappler comes from also doing a lot of BJJ isn't always 100% accurate. But even saying that, it's hard to completely disagree. Josh Jitsu 311 said, "It was a legitimate style, but is now mostly used as a label by a lot of guys who train only no-gi jiu-jitsu but call themselves catch wrestlers because they're unranked and don't want to call themselves white belts." I'm not sure this one is quite as fair. I guess it is true to some degree, but from my perspective, catch doesn't have grades, so being ungraded was never really an issue for me. I spent something ridiculous like 12 years as an ungraded white belt before finding a jiu-jitsu school that worked for me enough to want to stick around. And since then I've travelled up the grades pretty quickly so far. But I suppose there are people who use the name catch wrestler who actually aren't. Catch wrestling is legit as an art, even if it's really quite rare. Kintanen said, "I've rolled with a few catch guys. Mostly they try to replace actually knowing how to grapple with trying to yank on bad footlocks and neck cranks." You've got to admit, this is quite funny. There's definitely a theme developing here though, wouldn't you say? It does open quite an interesting possibility though. Maybe the two arts are actually more different than people give them credit for, and that because of the fairly significant difference in approach between the two, those people who only do BJJ see catch as being inferior because it doesn't prioritise the very thing that people spend years trying to develop in BJJ. The idea that positional superiority comes first, that catch is being judged as being less skilled simply because BJJ practitioners are judging based on BJJ criteria. Or maybe there are just more crappy self-taught catch guys out there than I thought. Basileus Butter. Basileus? Basileus? Dunno. I'm going to go with Basileus Butter said, "Catch guys are great on top, shit on bottom." I'd say this is pretty accurate. It's certainly a pretty good description of my last few years of grappling, but again, it's a fairly simplistic view of things. Being on the bottom in catch is akin to losing, and so no, it's not somewhere we spend much time perfecting skills. We just get out, sometimes very skillfully, and sometimes it's just a weird crappy scramble, but the whole concept of what you can do and should do from your back is, at least to me, the major difference between the two arts. So, while Basileus Butter is 100% right, you could just as easily say that jiu-jitsu guys are shit at avoiding the pin. How relevant that is another question entirely. Pat SX5SB said, "The sport itself is pretty much dead, but no-gi JJ absorbed most its techniques." Leaving aside the somewhat maverick approach to the English language, this is definitely something we've spoken about here on this channel before. I'm not convinced it's quite as cut and dry as this would suggest. I'm seeing some very encouraging signs of a bit of a resurgence in catch here in the UK, mainly thanks to the work done by the guys at the Snake Pit in Wigan and Josh Barnett. Getting some regular competitions going has definitely increased awareness of the art, and I'm speaking to more and more people across the UK who are now including catch in their grappling. 10, 12 years ago, there was almost nobody. Now there's talk of interclubs and competitions across the south of England, where before, well, there was pretty much just me. So I'd say this is a reasonable thing to say, but probably not 100% accurate. King Mob 4313 said, "Catch wrestling these days is like HEMA, trying to recreate a historical martial art that died back in around the turn of the century. I could go on and on about their history and where they've been and where they're going, but not needed here. Honestly, plenty of catch wrestling concepts have become tenets in the BJJ meta, controlling the arm at the hand, not the wrist for subs, the twister, the truck, the heel hooks rise to prominence, and so much more. But it's not really a complete grappling art. Really, it's more like the toppings on a burger, the burger being your main complex grappling art. There's a lot here. I've definitely asked the question about whether catch is HEMA, and to a degree, yeah, it absolutely is. There are HEMA groups out there that are doing catch pretty technically well, but without the fierce competitive aspect. Almost a watered down version of it. But even some of those clubs are turning people onto the art and getting people involved in competitive grappling. Rather than seeing that as a negative, I like to think of it as a gateway into a hard and effective art for people who wouldn't feel comfortable jumping into this type of school that teaches it more traditionally. I do take issue with the idea that it isn't a complete grappling art. That's clearly bollocks. Catch is perfectly complete in its own rule set. Yes, there are things in Jiu-Jitsu that aren't in catch because of the rules. But the opposite is also true. There are things in catch that are not in BJJ because of the rules. And let's not even get started on how striking changes the game. Slightly Stoop Kid, nice username by the way, said, "Catch is dead. Catch remains dead and we have killed it. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become Sakuraba simply to appear worthy of it?" I mean, what can I say? Great use of not quite Nietzsche there, and a perfect way to close this out. Slightly Stoop Kid, you win the internet for today. So, over to you. If you're a BJJ person, what do you really think of catch? And if you consider yourself a catch person, what reactions have you had at BJJ clubs? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you aren't subscribed yet, I hope you may consider clicking that button. It makes a massive difference to my channel and gives me a nice warm feeling inside when I see the numbers go up. And before I finish, I just want to say, hi Fahad, how you doing? Good to see you here, welcome to the team. And to those of you still here at the very end of the video, fight team.